So I'm going to briefly just share the agenda for this meeting and welcome everyone. It's great to see you all, and I think there's hope that next year's annual meeting will hopefully be in person, which will be great, and even some working group meetings between now, coming fairly soon. We may be able to actually meet in person. So let me share my screen. So can everyone see this? So here's the agenda for today. You can see welcome land acknowledgement, working group reports, a tribute to Ron Weber, elections, an appeal, and then at 4 o'clock, a little before 4, Steve will introduce Representative Clark. Then we'll have a Q&A, and we can continue discussion after Representative Clark has to leave, if people would like to keep talking about what we've heard and what we're thinking about, and then we'll close at 5 o'clock. So welcome everyone. We're moving up into the 40s of participants, which is wonderful. It's hard to be inside, but I'm glad you're all committed to being here with us. So most of you know I'm Sue Ellen Hirschman-Cherepin, president of Watertown Citizens. And I'm gonna read just our Watertown Citizens Pigs Gusset land acknowledgement. So Watertown Citizens for Peace, Justice, and the Environment acknowledges that the residents of Watertown live on land that is the traditional territory of the Pequawset people, a band of the indigenous Massachusetts tribe. The Pequawset cared for and stewarded this land for hundreds of generations. The English language rendering of the indigenous name of Watertown is Pigs Gusset, which is to the best of our knowledge, means the meadows at the widening of the river. We recognize that indigenous erasure and attempted genocide are still happening today, and it demands supportive action and solidarity. Let us,
Hi.
whoever is.
I have a better sense of my timing.
Could someone mute themselves, whoever that is? I can't see who it might be. So let us remember the achievements of the Pigs Gusset peoples and the ongoing struggles of their descendants as we reflect on how we can be good visitors and stewards of this place we call home. And now I just want to lay out a few things to remember for this meeting. One is that please make sure that your full name is visible on the screen. And please remain muted until you're either asked to speak or it's time for public Q&A. And this meeting's being recorded, just be aware of that. And last is just that after Representative Clark speaks and we have a Q&A period, we're asking people to just use the chat for questions. And if for any reason you're unable to use the chat, then let us know and we can recognize you to otherwise ask a question. And feel free to put those questions in the chat as they occur to you. You don't have to wait till the very last minute. All right, thank you very much. And so we're going to move right on to working group reports. And I will invite Felicia to report on behalf of the WCBL, the Watertown Citizens for Black Lives Working Group. Felicia.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Felicia Sullivan. I am on the leadership circle for Watertown Citizens for Black Lives. Our report is that we've been actively, I'd say our most active working group right now is our police policy reform group, which I'm chairing. We have continued to do a lot of work in that realm. And on April 22nd, we were able to be heard, made a presentation before the town council and the chief of police, and there are about 188 participants at that meeting. The presentation was done by myself and Sarah Elting and Sheila from Watertown Citizens for Black Lives, and we all went through it's a presentation that we've been working on for quite some time, and we actually previewed at the last WCPJE meeting. So we were engaged with other members of our joint police reform group,
Kelsey,
which,
this Tom, good. I just wanted to tell you there's
Oh. Sorry, somebody's not muted.
Tony, you need, okay, he's got it.
So our group was, we worked with Uplift Watertown as well as the Kenyan, a couple of the Kenyan groups, and we, I feel like that presentation went really well. There were a lot of good comments and questions that were made during that meeting. And as a next step, the next step is going to be that there's another meeting with the town council, and that'll be open to the public, and they want a date in 3 months out, which is a little bit frustrating, but it's, it's better than nothing. And so we're figuring out where to go from there, what our next steps will be. So we'll continue with our joint police reform group, and we'll see what happens. So that's it with the police policy reform group. We also have our school equity working group in Watertown, Citizens for Black Lives, which I'm also a participant on. That group has become more active lately, and we have been growing in numbers, and we have a lot of great conversations around making changes with the schools. We are really excited to welcome Dr. Kimberly Henry to the district, and who's as the chief DEI officer for the district, or director, sorry, not officer. So I'm really excited about that. So we've been talking through that. We have been we've been doing lots of letter writing in that group, and we are hoping actually to find somebody who's willing to run for school committee in the fall, because that's a really important position that's coming up. So we've been strategizing around that as well. And then another group that is part of Watertown Citizens for Black Lives is our What Happens Here, or It Happens Here group in Watertown, which is a working group that's focused on providing public information, providing a way for people to report when there are potential discrimination concerns, where they don't feel comfortable going to the police or going directly. They don't know what to do, don't feel like they can go directly to the town about it. There's a QRC code that's been created, and they're working on a potential website so people can go and confidentially find out more information on how to address concerns about discrimination.
Felicia, if I could interrupt you just for a second, we need to be
Sure.
really careful about the time. So if you can wrap up, that would be great.
Yep, no problem. And then just the last thing that I'll say is we do have a meeting on Monday, this coming Monday, the 3rd, and then we have our vigil, which is monthly, and that'll be next week, or the week after next.
Okay, thank you, Felicia. I'll just make a quick clarification. The Joint Police Reform Group did not meet with the full town council. We met with the Public Safety Committee, the 3 members, Lisa Feltner, Vinnie Piccirilli, and Angie Cornelis. Moving on, Jennifer Wolfram, could you give us a quick report on the Pigs Gusset Initiative Working Group?
Hello, thank you, Sue Ellen. Yes, for people who are not familiar, the Pigs Gusset Initiative is a group of Watertown residents who seek to increase communication and promote collaboration among other Watertown residents to undo the erasure of Indigenous peoples from the place now called Watertown, and to promote inclusive historical narratives. As a new working group, we're currently developing a document that will clarify our guiding principles, goals, and strategies for achieving our goals. So a couple of things that we've done so far is that we've generated a petition to ask the town council to reconsider the name of the Columbus Delta in Watertown Square. We've gathered more than the required number of signatures and are in the process of planning our next steps. We also became a working group of Watertown citizens for peace, justice, and the environment in September of 2020 and provided a presentation called Engaging Our Past for a More Truth-Filled Future. We have sponsored an online screening of the Emmy Award-winning documentary Dawnland for Watertown residents, also in September of 2020, that included discussion. And we've partnered with the Watertown Free Library to provide a conversation with culture keepers about local Indigenous history, with Jamie Carrillo, director and member of the Aymara people of Peru, and Mulam Morgan J. Peters, who's a playwright and member of the Wampanoag Mashpee tribe. And this was for the new rep's upcoming play, Listen to SIPO. We worked together with members of Black Lives Matter to generate an immediate response to the appearance of racist stickers in town that was sent to the town manager, chief of police, town councilors, superintendent of schools, and the department head for parks and fields. And we're really excited to be partnering with the new rep to bring an original Indigenous moving play called Listen to SIPO to Watertown. So the opening performance is scheduled for June 5th at 5:30, and the final performance is scheduled for July 11th at 1. So information will soon be available on the new rep's website for details about performance dates and times, and the performances will take place outside at the Commander's Mansion. We've done a little preview of the play just the other day, and it's really going to be amazing. So please mark your calendars. Keep checking on the new rep's website to see when information comes out about that. We're really looking forward to that and expanding the conversation in Watertown to talk more about the unerasure of Indigenous people. So thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. And now, Yola Henna, could you give us a quick update on the Refugee Support Working Group?
Hello. I'm gonna talk about what we did last month. We helped an undocumented family who's out of work because of COVID. We collected money to pay for their rent and utilities to avoid eviction. And while we helped them, this time one of our members applied for them for long-term assistance until they're able to return to work. We also took two of their daughters shopping for materials for art and craft making. And so because they were very stressed out about the situation that they're in. Also, we secured several purchases for arts from a Syrian refugee artist in Turkey. We bought, 3 members bought 3 artwork from her, and that supported her a lot, especially that she's helping her sister who has cancer now. So she really appreciated, and she's feeling very grateful to our organization. She thanks everyone. Also, we helped deliver food to several immigrant families in need. And we're busy preparing for our June 27th evening fundraiser with Yo-Yo Ma and Syrian clarinetist Kinan Azmi. And it's going to be live streamed that Sunday evening. So mark your calendar. It's very important.
Yola.
Last thing is with help from Sophia Suarez, Friedman, at Watertown Mutual Aid Network, homeless immigrant we have been helping is now in a lovely subsidized Watertown apartment. And last, I would like to thank Watertown citizens for helping me personally and helping my family who resettled in Watertown last year. They came from Syria, and the organization helped refurnish their apartment for them. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you, Yola, for that nice report.
You're welcome.
And next, Ann Munson for Watertown Faces Climate Change Working Group.
Hi, everybody. Well, it's been a very busy year, and somehow the quarantine didn't seem to slow things down at all. I went back in my agendas and minutes and realized it's crazy how much we did during this whole year of craziness. One of our primary foci in the year was what I call bird dogging the elementary school building process. For instance, in March of 2020, we were discussing whether Watertown should own, yes, or lease, no, the solar panels on the elementary schools. Should we have piping for dishwashers in the schools? Yes. And on and on and on in incredible detail all around how can we make these buildings buildings that we will want to be in and that will protect our future for the next 50, 75 years. I will say that during that process, much of the welcome from the officials doing this work was pretty lukewarm, but we stayed the course and to great effect. Everybody knows about the success of the 2 net zero elementary schools being built in Watertown. And the credit for that goes to many people in Watertown Faces Climate Change, as well as town officials and people in We3C and lots of the other community groups in Watertown. So congratulations to everyone on that. So now I'm just going to give you a list because I don't want to go over my 2 minutes too far. We've worked on helping people, encouraging people to opt up to 100% renewable through the Watertown Electricity Choice Program campaign. Just want to ask all 47 people here whether they've done that yet. We've joined a nationwide pressure campaign against Chase Bank and other funders of fossil fuel projects. We've lobbied for the climate bill, which is now the climate law. We've lobbied for locally for a solid waste plan for Watertown, including curbside pickup for organic material. And there has finally been some progress there. I think when it's all said and done, we should name something after Lissa Gifford for holding that torch for 20 years. We put 2 questions on the Watertown ballot. One was a climate question and one called for greater transparency in the Mass State House of Representatives. It passed flyingly. Not that the House has become more transparent yet, but you know, we've advocated for the 71 and 73 MBTA buses to remain, or at least end up after the rebuild of Mount Auburn, to end up fully electric. And more recently, we have begun calling attention to the greenhouse gas emissions that the new commercial buildings will emit if they aren't built with the climate crisis in mind, writing letters to developers, and particularly pressuring our planning department and other government officials and wondering why they aren't leading this charge, given that they are the primary interface with these corporations and companies who really, really, really want to move into Watertown, but are going to bring their traffic and their emissions. And we ought to be asking them what they're going to do about that, including perhaps making the transportation shuttles no longer voluntary. So it's been a great year, and I am incredibly happy this incredible group of activists who never tire and have done so much. So that's
Great.
it for me.
Thank you, Anne. Okay, so we're running a few minutes behind. We need to be careful of this because of respecting Representative Clark's time. But Pam, we want to give a brief update on the Friends of Bees Working Group?
Sure. I'm always brief. We've carried on our usual work. Over the course of the last year, I put together a document pulling together a lot of different sources about recommendations for pollinator gardens. And I've been currently distributing it to anyone who is interested. You can find that on the website. Also on the website, I've recently updated our list of places where you can buy untreated plants that are safe for bees. And we've also participated in statewide advocacy against pesticides and attending like local meetings to keep the Grove Street Community Garden that's been taken over by Buckingham Brown and Nichols to keep it as green as possible. And that's where we are.
Okay, and we get a close-up view of your cat.
Yes.
And I want to turn the meeting over now to Jackie Gross, who's going to read a tribute to Ron Weber.
So, Ron, I see you on there, the wave. I am delighted to have been given the opportunity to honor Ron for his dedication and invaluable contribution to Watertown citizens for peace, justice, and the environment. There are several things that we want to celebrate in honoring Ron today. For several years, he not only served on our steering committee, but took on the crucial and tedious job of serving as our treasurer. He brought his business skills, experience, and talents to his work with us, and always with a positive, cheerful attitude. Ron's enthusiasm and humor lightened our spirits in many ways while poring over the financial reports. When I think about Ron, in my mind, I see him, his twinkle in his eye and his mischievous, friendly smile. So Ron, your work is greatly appreciated by all of us, and you will not be forgotten. Today we honor you and thank you so very much. I don't know, Jean, did you give him the card? There you go.
Okay,
Thank you, Ron.
thank you, Ron. Great. And now is time for our annual elections. And all of us, I will read you the list of the people who are on our slate. It's myself as president, Deborah Peterson as secretary, Jean Trubeck, treasurer, and then Nicole Gardner, Jackie Gross, Tony Palumba, Pam Phillips, Arun Sanuti, and running for the first time, Jennifer Wolfram. And we're delighted to have Jennifer there. I'll just tell you briefly a little bit about her. She became very active in social justice in high school with the Revitalization Corps, was sort of modeled on the Peace Corps, and worked bridging Black and Puerto Rican inner city neighborhoods with the white suburbs. And she studied African-American literature and anti-war activities. And then she moved here very recently, I think last July, if I remember correctly. And she's already just very, very active in several working groups. And we're just delighted that she's agreed to run for our steering committee. So with that, I'm just going to ask if people can just use the reactions part of your, either a thumbs up in electronic thumbs up under reactions on your screen, or if you're unable to do that, just raise your hand. And I have a feeling that the steering committee is about to be reelected for another year. So thank you all for voting us in, and we look forward to another year filled with lots of good things and accomplishments. All right, thank you all very much. And at this point, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Tony for an announcement. You're muted, Tony. There you go.
Much. I appreciate that. I think I see that Representative Clark is here, so I'm going to try to make this very brief. My job every year seems to be to ask you to support Watertown citizens for peace, justice, and the environment. It's a thing I like doing because I have an opportunity to tell you how important I think this organization is and how important it is for you to support us. You've heard just now presentations from 5 of our working groups. That is in addition to the work that we do around for U.S. foreign policy, U.S. policy on the Middle East. We also, as you know, do a wonderful monthly meeting, and we've had some great presentations at each of those monthly meetings. They are really an opportunity for us not only to be educated and learn about topics, but also just to share our own ideas and our own thoughts about what some of the challenges we face in both in Watertown, statewide and nationally. So I urge you to, if you haven't, you all should, many of you should have gotten this little green form in the mail along with this little envelope. And we'd like you to take a moment to fill out that green form and make a donation to Watertown citizens. You also can do that online. Deborah you just go to our website, www.watertowncitizens.org, excuse me, and press a button that's right up there up front, and it'll take you to where you can make a donation online. Believe it or not, we have some fixed costs each year. Jean, the treasurer, and I went over things, and it is very clear to run an organization. We need at least about $1,500 to $2,000 just to do the things we, not outside of the programming work we do. And that's just for the mail house, that's for the internet service, for our website, so a variety of other fixed costs that we have. So we turn to you each year to make it possible for us to do that. And I want to end this by saying what's most important about us is that we're here for years. We've been here for 42 years, and my guess is we'll be here for the next 42 years. And that's because we have established ourselves as the organization in Watertown where people can come, bring their issues, possibly start a working group, but always have an opportunity to share their information and to help us educate and activate and engage Watertown citizens. So please take a moment, go to the website or fill out the form, but make your annual contribution to Watertown citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. And I might add that $2,000 Tony was talking about is just like the bare skeleton. And as we become less pandemic ridden, and we'll be doing events outside and spaces and putting on programs that like we have in the past, that will be even more labor intensive and costly. So thank you very much. And with that, I will turn the meeting over to Steve Owens. And Steve, I think most of us have known Steve for a long time. He was elected as our state rep this past November for 29th Middlesex District. And he's, as many of us have worked with him, and he has worked so hard on many campaigns for progressive candidates in Watertown over many years, and also chairing the Watertown Democratic Town Committee. So he has an amazing amount of experience, and he's now sitting on the Joint Financial Services Committee, the Joint Telecommunications and Utilities and Energy Committee at the State House, and also the House Global Warming and Climate Change Committee. So he's filed a suite of bills that trying to help reduce congestion and emissions in transportation. And we are delighted to have you with us, Steve. And of course, we're so thrilled to have you there at the State House, and really appreciate you introducing the Honorable Representative Katherine Clark.
Thanks, Sue Ellen. I really appreciate it. Watertown Citizens has been big fans of me, and I've been big fans of them for a long time. So I appreciate the opportunity. As we all know, Katherine Clark started her political career back in 2001. She was a member of the Melrose School Committee, and in a few short years, she just rocketed through positions in the State House, in the House of Representatives, in the State Senate, and in 2013, you'll all remember, she was elected to U.S. Congress in that highly contested race to replace now Senator Ed Markey. And in the short time she's been in Washington, she's really continued her trajectory. And at the beginning of this session, she was elected to be the Assistant Speaker of the House, the fourth highest leadership position in the body. But throughout that rapid rise, she's just never really forgotten her commitment to helping children and families succeed. She's been a champion of childcare and early childhood education, and her sit-in 2016 on the House floor with the late Representative John Lewis to protest Congress's inaction on gun violence was really just the stuff of legend. She's one of the previous administration's fiercest critics, and I know that she will be there as one of President Biden's strongest progressive allies in the House. It's just my great honor and privilege to introduce our Congresswoman, Katherine Clark. Thanks so much, Katherine.
Thank you so much, Steve. It's so good to see all of you. Thank you, Tony, and everyone at Watertown Citizens. It is great to be with you, even virtually in our little tiny boxes. Really, really good to see you. And, you know, as we welcome a new administration and begin the urgent work of the 117th Congress, we really do find ourselves a nation at a crossroads. And historic challenges, like Watertown Citizens know, require historic progress. And this pandemic has brought into stark relief so many of the inequalities that have persistently plagued our nation, whether it's economic, gender, climate, or racial injustice. They have all been exposed and exacerbated by COVID-19 and its economic fallout. And women have been at the intersection of all these points of adversity. Women on the front lines, whether in hospitals, grocery stores, in elder care and child care. Women are being pushed out of the workforce at record rates while struggling to keep their families fed, housed, healthy, and hopeful. Industries comprised by businesses predominantly owned and operated by women, like childcare businesses, and the restaurant and retail industries are being hit the hardest. And we've come face to face with the ramifications of an economy that has long marginalized and devalued women's work. The lack of accessible, affordable childcare, paid family leave, healthcare, adequate workers' rights, and reproductive injustice have held our economy back and prevented us from fulfilling America's promise. And we have also seen our very democracy hang in the balance. I will never forget the violent mob at the United States Capitol on January 6th, and that it really was a culmination of 4 years of hate, division, and white supremacy fueled by Donald Trump. It's been a dark period in our American history, but it has also given us a blueprint to move forward. And we have to seize this moment. And our first priority has been to deliver immediate relief to those suffering from the pandemic. We needed to put in place a national strategic plan for testing and vaccine distribution. And in March, we came together to pass President Biden's American Rescue Plan to accelerate vaccination, scale up testing and tracing, address shortages of PPE, reduce the cost of premium with those with healthcare coverage through the ACA marketplaces, reopen schools, stabilize childcare, deliver immediate relief to working families with additional direct payments and child tax credits that is going to lift over half of the children in this country out of poverty, extend unemployment and nutrition assistance benefits, and provide billions in critical rental assistance, and support small businesses that have been hit the hardest by this pandemic, especially childcare and restaurant industries. Moving forward, I know that all of you join me in understanding that we can't simply return to the status quo. We must rebuild a more inclusive economy that gives everyone a fair shot at success. Our priorities in Congress are making crucial investments in education so that all students have the opportunity to succeed, growing our economy by investing in paid leave and guaranteeing equal pay, protecting that sacred right to vote, and restoring faith in our democracy, acting urgently to combat the existential threat of climate change with a bold infrastructure package that prioritizes sustainability and resilience and creates millions of good paying green jobs. These are the priorities of the House Democrats since we took over the gavels in 2019. And now, as Steve said, with a White House and a Senate back on the side of the American people, we finally have the ability to turn this agenda into action. I'm excited to continue this work in my new position in leadership. The assistant speaker role is a fairly new elected position for the caucus, but I am excited to work with my team for our agenda and to support our newest congressional members. We have an incredibly diverse Democratic caucus in experience, race, gender, ideology, and background. When I look around at my colleagues, I see the faces of our country looking back at me. And that diversity is our strength. We are not a monolith, and we all have something to offer and reflect in our communities from back home. And my job is to make sure that we are not just treating our diversity as a talking point, but bringing those diverse voices and expertise to the leadership table to come up with the best solutions to the challenges we face. So this is what gives me great optimism, even in these most challenging times. We have a record number of women serving in the 117th Congress, 144 women between the House and Senate, and of course, our first woman vice president, Kamala Harris. I never saw myself running for public office, let alone a position in House leadership. But it's clear that when we have a seat at the table, families have a voice in Washington. And it's our personal experiences that we draw on. And we know that when moms get the health care they need, their families are healthier. When we invest in childcare as critical infrastructure, we all benefit. I was fortunate enough to be in the House chamber for the president's joint address to Congress last week, and I came away feeling so optimistic. It has been a dark and isolating period, but it is clear that we are on a road to a brighter, more equitable future. We are going to build on the work that all of you have done, the critical work of social justice as we recover and rebuild. And all of you are going to be such important partners in that work. So whether as your representative in my role on Appropriations Committee or in House leadership, I will continue to lean on your guidance and advice. And I hope you consider me and my entire staff a partner in your efforts. I am so pleased to be with you today. Thank you for sharing a beautiful Sunday afternoon with me. And I look forward to answering your questions. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you very much, Representative Clark. It is a real delight and honor for us to have you with us. And we've got a couple questions. I'm trying to remember who's monitoring the questions.
I've got them. I've got two so far, and I've got one of my own, and I was wondering at what point do I exploit my position and just ask?
Always go first, Pam.
I remember meeting you at the Watertown Community Gardens when
Yes.
you were wondering why my compost was full of hazelnut shells. I also remember watching you do the sit-in about gun safety legislation with Representative John Lewis. I was just wondering if you'd like to reflect on your work with him, and where do you see things going forward with gun safety now that you've both with this incredibly full plate that Congress has right now?
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Pam, for giving me an opportunity to talk about John Lewis. It was just such a personal and professional privilege to get to serve with him, to get to know him, to travel to Selma with him 3 times and go over that Pettus Bridge with him. He's just such an iconic person and truly one of the most, just a person whose life was led with such integrity and really with just such love for his common man. And I think that is why he was always approached everything with a view of trying to see sort of the divinity in everybody and make that connection on a very deep level. But gun violence was one of the issues that was extremely important to him. He, very much like Watertown citizens, was in a quest for peace and saw this as an issue that is becoming a uniquely American problem and that he wanted to be a solution on. And the sit-in actually came about right after the horrible shooting in Orlando, where we lost all those young lives on a dance floor, in a LGBTQ club, which for so many of our gay youth, it is that dance floor where they find connection and refuge. And I just couldn't take the fact that, Democrats were in the minority at that point, that we had this grisly ritual of just maybe 1 or 2, maybe 1 minute, like maybe a 6-minute presentation from the member of Congress where some tragedy had happened. We'll have a very brief moment of silence, and then we were just moving on, like we were not the United States Congress, like somehow there was nothing we could do. And so I kept going to members saying, we've got to do something more than just continue this silence. We're never backing it up with action. And I went and sat with John Lewis and I asked him what he thought we could do. And he suggested a sit-in. And if John Lewis ever suggested a sit-in, was there any other answer? But of course, and his name, the whole history of civil rights that he brought with him, I think made that an inflection point in the movement for gun safety in this country. We never got Republicans to bring the bill to the floor, but people saw that we too were feeling their pain. So we have once again passed universal background checks and closing the Charleston loophole, which is a loophole in background checks that let the shooter in Charleston get a gun that he wasn't entitled to. And we will see. Its fate is with the Senate, and it's one of those many issues as we look to the Senate with a slim majority. Getting 10 votes from Republicans is going to be very difficult. So, we have to look at what we are going to do and how the Senate's going to tackle filibuster reform. But I think that we have the potential. We have some excellent people like Chris Murphy from Connecticut, who is really working day and night to get this bill through the Senate and is optimistic that we can do it. And I think once we can get universal background checks and people in swing seats, people in Republican seats, see that that is met with accolades and not derision, I think we can use that to build some of that muscle memory of how we don't have to live moving mass shooting to mass shooting. So it is wonderful to have a president who is demanding that we get this done and we get it done soon, and wants to sign a bill as soon as we can. So I have renewed hope, and I think it's so important that we seize this moment on that issue. And on voting rights, I just have to say, when we're talking about John Lewis.
So important.
So,
All right. Thank you very much. That's very hopeful. The next question that I have comes from Eileen Ryan, speaking for the Pigs Gusset Initiative and Watertown Faces Climate Change. She wants to thank you for supporting the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act.
Yes.
And what can we do in Massachusetts to help make sure it passes?
Yeah, well, you know, this is a bill that I'm very excited about, that can really help us actually create better recycling programs, help discontinue some of the plastics that we produce today, and address this critical issue as we look at climate change. So any support that you can give, anyone that you regularly write to, we want to make sure that people understand how important this is. This bill has not passed the House yet, so we are working on getting that done. I think it will probably be, a little, we have to get through sort of the infrastructure and jobs plans this summer, but I'm very hopeful that moving into the fall, we're going to be able to move this bill. And all the work that Watertown Citizens has done on environmental justice, addressing climate change, this is right in your wheelhouse. So we'll be calling you in for supports on this bill as well.
Thank you. Pam, you're muted.
Sorry, I've been doing a lot of typing too. Questions. You guys are coming in fast and furious here.
Good.
The next question comes in from Sue Ellen, and this is a very hot topic for our refugee support group, because we do a lot of efforts to help support the resettlement that goes on in Mass, especially near the Watertown area.
Oh,
and Ellen asks, what can we do about the Trump era-like extremely low refugee resettlement numbers that President Biden has announced?
Yes, we are expressing to the White House, we all should be, that, the numbers that have been announced are not sufficient, and that we need to get back to numbers that we had prior to Donald Trump and more. We know the crisis for refugees around the world. And we just have to do better. And this was a promise that President Biden made in the campaign. And I think it's up to all of us to make sure that he follows through. And I can tell you from my conversations with the White House, I do think they're open to this. So I'm very hopeful if we keep the pressure up that they will adjust those numbers upward dramatically.
Okay. The next question comes from Diane Crowley, and she remarks that while it is heartening that the Biden administration is going to lift 50% of American children out of poverty through the supplemental income that's coming from their tax credits, why isn't the administration also aiming to lift all of America's children out of poverty? And I hope you will fight for the other 50%.
Yeah, well, we are pushing to make this tax credit permanent. So far, we've gotten a 5-year commitment from the Biden administration on it. And I do think this is a huge step forward. And, we would like to end child poverty in this country. We are moving in the wrong direction. Now we have 12 million children that go to bed hungry every night in our country, which is really a shame that we should all be carrying in this incredibly wealthy country, that we are seeing rates of hunger go up in our communities, and Watertown is no exception. Is so dramatically. We've seen 150% increase in childhood hunger in Massachusetts since the pandemic began. So we have a lot of work to do, but this has also been a proposal that has been pushed by Rosa DeLauro and others for 18 years. And we have been able to get it across the line. And now what we have to do is make it permanent and use other expansions of access to healthcare, tax credits that are really aimed at pulling families and especially children out of poverty. So this is to be celebrated, a monumental first step, but we know that that our goal should be and that we can eradicate childhood poverty in this country.
Make sure I'm not mute. Okay, thank you. The next question is very short, but I suspect it might have a long answer. Ledoux asked, what specifically are the current administration's climate goals?
Yeah, well, the climate goals are many. And I can tell you that, you know, we are back in the Paris Accord, which is great, but that is just a preliminary goal. We have to reduce our you know, our carbon output and meet all those standards that have been set by 2050. And, you know, this jobs plan, infrastructure plan, whatever you choose to call it, is an incredible opportunity for us to put that into effect. Whether it's making investments in renewable resources, using our, you know, investments in research that really go across the line, I mean, across a broad spectrum of green technologies, and retraining for those who are in the fossil fuel energy jobs. We have to make sure that we are bringing those workers along with us into a cleaner and greener future. So you know, I think a good blueprint for what you can see coming from the House was the Moving Forward Act that we passed back in June of 2020. That included so many pieces of addressing climate change and so many different investments in research, in, you know, taking carbon out of the air, in using agriculture, and also developing longer battery life, all these different pieces that are going to help us meet the goals that we have for reduction by 2050. So I'm excited that we are going to be able to get this done. We just know the urgency of this issue and that we cannot afford to wait for, you know, some correct political time. You know, we have these majorities, however slim, in a White House that is committed to this. I think having Gina McCarthy and John Kerry in key roles as senior White House advisors on climate shows the commitment of this administration, and the time for us is to act and to re-engage with you know, our global partners that frankly aren't sure how trustworthy we are. And we have to show them that we are going to be doing everything we can to meet climate goals, to make sure that we are increasing renewable energy, and that we will be good partners across the globe in this work. So I'm hopeful. You know, there's already been the one major global conference that President Biden has already held, but they'll be meeting again in October. And I'm hoping that we will be able to show by then that we have passed major legislation on climate and, you know, really start modeling again for the world on how we are going to tackle this.
Okay, wow, thank you. The next question comes from Susan Nye, and she says, Minnesota Representative Betty McCollum has just introduced a groundbreaking bill, HR 2590. Oh, gonna write it down?
Sure.
2590.
I have to tell you, I don't know any bill numbers except HR 1. So,
right. Defending the human rights of Palestinian children and families living under Israeli Military Occupation Act.
yes.
And she would like to know if you're going to co-sponsor.
I have co-sponsored in the past. I don't think that I'm on that bill currently. She switched some language around, so my team is reviewing it. But also in that sort of vein around Palestinians and the interests in the West Bank, I have also submitting language into the appropriations bill for consideration that would say any funding that we send to Israel, and this is not creating a condition, but a requirement on end use, cannot be used to extend settlements that are considered disputed territorial lines by the United States. So sort of in the same vein, a different focus, not on the children and detention of children, but also at looking at the West Bank and how we can prevent the destabilization of some of the Palestinian communities that we have seen through very aggressive settlements. So those are sort of two pieces. Betty also serves on appropriations with me that we are looking at as we move through that process.
Okay. So speaking of HR 1, Councilor Paloma adds that the For the People legislation may be the most important bill if elections are to be fair and people of color and marginalized people have the opportunity to vote. And Tyler Kemp Benedict asks, is there anything that we as voters and constituents and you as a leader in the House can do to make sure that the Senate does not lose this important opportunity to pass HR 1, the For the People Act, if necessary by reforming or abolishing the filibuster? It's so important that we enact this small d democratic reform while Democrats have a majority in Washington to make sure we don't end up with an anti-democratic one-party state.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. I couldn't agree with you more. This bill is it. HR 1 and the John Lewis Civil Rights Act that puts back in pieces of the Civil Rights Act that were stripped by the Supreme Court, but are absolutely necessary for accountability, especially going into redistricting. And HR 1 contains so much that will help us build transparency, that will protect the right to vote, that will give us tools against voter suppression that we're seeing coming out of Georgia and Florida. And everybody says, if you didn't like what those two states did, wait till you see what Texas package will look like. We know that this is a reaction to the kind of voter work that was done and the turnout that we saw in Georgia. And when you know you can't win any longer on the issues, they are going to try and suppress the vote to win in the midterms. So we have this time, and everything we want to do around climate change, building a more inclusive economy, racial justice, you name it, foreign affairs, security in for Palestinians, peace around the world, all of it is dependent for us on protecting the fundamentals of our democracy. And in particularly, as we go into redistricting, there are provisions in HR 1 that allow us to bring cases to federal court around redistricting that have to put them on a very fast docket so that we can get a decision and move forward in time for the 22 elections. So for that piece alone, we need to move this legislation. And like the rest of you on this call, I do not have a vote on filibuster. And so it is going to take all of us pushing that public sentiment. I think there is there is talk that if I had a vote in the Senate, I would do away with the filibuster. And I understand the concerns that there are of, that at some point we'll be back in the minority and it's meant to protect minority rights. But I highly recommend the book Kill Switch to all of you that really traces through the very racist underpinnings of the filibuster and how it has been used to suppress civil rights legislation and has really gotten so far from what its original design was. So whether we carve out just an exception for voting rights, I'm good with that, but I would vote to get rid of the entire filibuster, but we have to seize this moment. And if we don't, if we can't find our way to getting these bills through, and I see no indication we're going to have 10 Republican senators join us, just the opposite. We have to make sure that every single one of our Democratic senators will acknowledge and work for these changes to protect voting. It is just the two most critical pieces of legislation that we can pass.
Sorry. I've got another question from Councilor Paloma. He mentions that President Biden plans to fund his Build Back Better programs costing almost $4 trillion by raising taxes on high-income individuals and corporations. However, there's no mention of making any cuts to the bloated military budget. Why do you think that might be the case?
Yeah, I can't really speak for the White House on that, but I can tell you there's a lot of interest in the House caucus on looking at the defense budget very carefully. And I think, we're going to need a combination. We're not going to be able probably to get every tax, and I really see the tax proposals as a rebalancing and making our tax code more fair again, and having those 55 of our largest corporations that paid zero in federal tax last year come back to the table and help us make these critical investments in NIH, in our roads and bridges, expanding broadband, access to healthcare, childcare, renewable energy, all these pieces, which in the end help their bottom line as well. So this is going to be a chance to build fairness back into our tax code. But I think that we also have to look very clear-eyed at the defense budget and see, we can't do it all. So let's look at that budget, which we know has continued to grow and outpace domestic spending, and also try and rebalance that. All of us want a secure country. All of us want secure borders, but at what expense to the financial security of families here? And how we rebalance that as well is going to be a key part of how we go forward in this putting the American family first again.
Okay, thank you. I've got a couple
Tony's
of
on it here.
got a couple questions that both talk about the relationship between the federal government and state and local government.
Mhm.
This is from Felicia Sullivan from Watertown for Black Lives. She asks, how can local activists use state and federal partners to make change on the local level? And Joseph Fertella, also asking for Watertown for Black Lives, asks, is there anything being done on the federal level to shift the funding that goes to police departments in this country and moving some of that money into programs that more closely address public safety concerns, such as mental health, homelessness, and addiction?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And, it is, I think sometimes, especially around issues of policing and how we go about addressing and rooting out the racism that is institutionalized in policing and in our criminal justice system. Often the federal government doesn't have that direct ability to do that in local police departments. And our municipal police departments around Massachusetts. But I do think that we can help by leading by example. The George Floyd Police Reform Act that passed the House and sits in the Senate now is just one example. If we are successful in reforming qualified immunity, which in practice has turned into absolute immunity and a legal standard that is just impossible for most plaintiffs to possibly make and reach, where you have to have the exact same fact pattern, have been determined before to be outside of reasonable conduct of a police officer in order to get around immunity. I mean, that is that standard is impossible for people to meet. And it has just eroded accountability and further eroded justice in our streets and for Black and Brown communities. So, I think that is where we can really help partner. Of course, funding is also an area. We, of course, cannot defund police and make those local funding decisions. But what we can do is increase funding around mental health, around homelessness, around police training programs, on things such as how to deal, a bill that I've been interested in for a long time is addressing people with autism and other mental health potential issues, and looking at social workers and their role in, policing and security of our communities, and really all these pieces that can help us transfer our police from a status of warriors to guardians. And what does that look like? And I think that this phrase defunding police has been used as a political bludgeon. And a lot of people, a lot of Democrats get very nervous when we talk about it. But I think if we talk about how do we best keep our community safe, and every single person in our community, I want every mom to have the security that I have as a white mom, that when I send my children out, of all the things that keep me up at night worrying about them, I never worry they're going to be hurt, injured, or killed because of the color of their skin. And that should not be just something reserved for white people in this country. That should be something that is available to everyone in our communities. And when we have that security for Black and Brown families, that is going to be, and Asian, that is going to be a security increase for all of us. This pandemic has taught us that we are so intertwined in how, if a neighbor is not doing well, we are not doing well. And that police reform is nothing to fear, but to be embraced, because it will give us all the opportunity to live in more secure communities. But this interaction between the federal government and local government, there's barriers there, but there are ways that we can help with funding around increasing social workers, increasing access to mental health, to housing, to educational opportunities. All of this comes to bear on how we look at police and demand reform and equality and justice in our criminal justice system.
Wow. You mentioned children, and everybody wants, speaking of children, I've got another question from Felicia Sullivan asking, has there been enough progress in funding the Child Care and Development Block Grant to prevent a collapse of the child care system?
Well, I think we have prevented the collapse, between what we were able to do in the CARES Act, that was fairly minimal, and then $10 billion at the end of December. And then in the American Rescue Plan, $40 billion. That is what I asked for a year ago, was $50 billion to stabilize. Now we have to move forward and actually be able to support childcare so that it is affordable and accessible to everyone. And this is such a crucial part of combating the job loss we've seen for women. Childcare affects men and women and families and grandparents, but particularly women. And women in low paid work. And we know we have an economy. I've been quoting a sociologist who said other countries have a social safety net. We have the work of women. And we know that these care jobs are so vital to people being able to go to work, to care for their loved ones, not having to make that choice between keeping their job and being with a sick parent or child. But we have seen 2 million women leave the workforce. We're at a 33-year low in women's participation in the workforce. And that is not out of choice. That is being pushed out primarily by a lack of childcare. So I am very confident the 50 billion is going to help us stabilize. But Elizabeth Warren and I are pushing the administration for a $70 billion year investment per year for the next 10 years so that we can really build a childcare system, enact the president's vision for universal pre-K, and really give our youngest learners a great shot at reading at grade level by 3rd grade, which we know is that milestone that can really unlock opportunity for a child's lifetime, and also is a great support to our workforce and our businesses. And I can tell you that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce does not call me very often looking to collaborate, but on this issue they have. And the business community understands how important this is, and we have to use that partnership to our advantage in getting this funding. And I think that we can use just how devastating this pandemic was in so many ways, but in particular to the childcare industry that was always holding on, by the fingernails in the best of times, and really change this paradigm that childcare is, always been considered sort of a private decision between parents and a provider, to recognizing that it is a public good and really part of our education system and workforce development that we need to invest in. So we have all the research that shows there is at least a 7-to-1 return, and it goes up to estimates of, for every dollar invested, you get $14 or $17 back. But we know if you just take the lowest rate of return from researchers, it's 7-to-1. This is a great investment in families, in our kids, and in the economy of the future.
Thank you so much, Representative Clark. I just want to acknowledge that it's about 4:45, and I know we have.
I've been really talking a lot.
Yeah, which is wonderful. It's been really great to have you engaged and with us.
Yeah.
So there's one more question I see in the chat, but if you need to stop right now, we will, of course, we'll do that.
I think I have time for one more. I
think this is a really good, I'm glad you have time to address this last question, because I think it's a really good pivot towards looking towards the future. Because as you know, it's never too soon to talk about the next election.
That's right. I'm glad you feel that way.
And there's, and we look forward to returning, keeping you going in Washington to do all the fantastic work you've been doing for us. And Connie Henry asked, what are your suggestions to people in Massachusetts for candidates that we can support that will help keep the House blue in 2022?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And let's stay in touch. We are We are right now sort of putting our focus on incumbents who won by less than 2% of the vote. So we know they're going to have a tough re-election in 22, and really waiting to see on how these different redistricting how that impacts people both positively and negatively, on where we could have some new opportunities before we sort of move on to the new candidates. I, as a member of leadership, tend not to get involved in primaries, but there are some outstanding, for all of you, some outstanding primaries coming up in Ohio and down in Texas and some other places over the next several months. Unfortunately, some of our Republican governors have made those special elections very, very long, so that the seat will not be filled by Democrats for some time. Alcee Hastings, who just passed away, in Florida, the governor is saying maybe a special election in February or January of next year. And same with Marcia Fudge's position in Ohio. The Ohio governor set that for November. So quite a long ways to keep our margin even tighter in the House for as long as possible. But I think that I'd be happy to work with you on sort of my lists of people that I feel really can use the early funding and support to make sure that we come through 22 strong. And I think we're going to be there on the policies and making those connections to the American people, that they can see and start to rebuild their faith in our government, and that our government is working for them and not, just moving past them and working for the well-connected and the already very wealthy. But it goes back to that voting rights. We just have to do everything we can, because I think our policies are going to be right. I think the American people, I hope we're going to be on an economy that is an upswing, and where a lot of people can see opportunity they may not have had before. But voting rights is going to be absolutely critical. But I'll leave this on a upswing note for about voting rights. I did a event with a few activists, and Lucy McBath, who's a congresswoman from Georgia, and some of the activists were and organizers on the ground, parts of the amazing grassroots organization that took place in Georgia. And I was sort of expecting this defeated attitude about the law changes they had seen, but instead, I see my staff is calling me for my next event. They're like, time for you to go. But they said that people are so motivated, and they see these laws as trying to take away their right to vote. And these activists were saying, like, listen, we got to do everything we can to change these laws. But if they thought people were just going to go home and take this quietly, it has had the absolute opposite effect in Georgia. People are organizing, they're getting ready, and they are not going to let their vote be taken from them. So we can all take heart in that and support them in every way we can. And we have to make sure that we are talking to communities of color, of communities that are disenfranchised now, and connecting the dots between the American Rescue Plan and the work that we're going to do to include them in our economy going forward. But we have to protect that right to vote. So thank you so much for your incredible work. You are the best partners. I'm feel so lucky to represent Watertown, and just share your vision, for this time where we can really address these issues of racial justice and how we grow and cultivate peace in this world. and make sure that we are building back better with more inclusive and fair economy and taxation, and really bringing all those values to our budgets and our spending. And to have the work you do locally to be able to incorporate and build upon means so much to me. So thank you for your time. Thank you for being such great partners. And I hope all of you are well and
Thank
get those vaccines. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you so much, Representative Clark. It's been great having you here.
Thank you.
Just terrific. So we have about 6 minutes left to our ending time at 5 o'clock. And if people would like to make comments, continue the discussion, any comments about Representative Clark's presentation, this is the time. You're welcome to do that. And if you could raise your electronic hand, that would be good. And if you can't do that, just let us know some other way. And need some help.
I didn't realize I would feel like I was conducting an interview with her.
Pam, you did great.
Towards the end.
Thank you, Steve, for the introduction of Katherine also.
Happy to do it. She's fantastic.
Yeah, she really is. Like I said, I've admired her ever since I met her at the gardens.
There's some good questions you guys came up
How do
with.
people feel about incumbents versus progressives?
What does that mean?
Oh, very often I think Clark may have kind of been alluding to that when she talked about not getting into primaries, but often progressives are running against more mainline, midstream Democrats, and the centrists are more likely to win. So, I think she's asking: is it more important to keep incumbents in place to defend the majority, or is it more important to elect more progressive candidates to advance a more substantial agenda?
Barbara Ruskin, is that accurate? Feel free to unmute and clarify.
I can't find all my buttons and pictures and everything, but yes, I was just wondering, because sometimes incumbents do win. I mean, progressives do win. And it's just hard to know where to put your energies, and there seems to be a big debate. And I certainly didn't want to interrupt her talk to ask, but I was just wondering what people here think. But
Tricky
doesn't have to be
question.
today, it can be, doesn't have to be today.
I was just struck that she mentioned Lucy Macbeth, because that's one of the people I gave money to last year. Although there's so many of them, I couldn't remember exactly. So it was really good to get that refresher on the work that she's doing in Georgia.
I mean, the versus incumbents versus progressives is a little bit misleading. There are certainly progressive incumbents and someone like Ed Markey who is having a tough campaign. And we thought, we weren't really sure what was happening with Kennedy. So I assume, Barbara, that you mean less progressive incumbents versus progressives.
Yeah. I think Anne has a question. Anne, why don't you go ahead and unmute yourself? Where'd you go?
If people have ideas about how to engage on the We the People, or whatever it's called, the one I mean, the voting right, the
Yeah.
back, what is it called again?
For the people.
For the people. Yeah, there you go. Does anybody, I just feel like we're all sitting here watching this train roll at us, and I haven't heard anybody, having phone banks, or I haven't heard any activism around it, and it's making me quite nervous. I'd feel better if there was something to do. Does anybody have any thoughts about that?
Does anybody have relatives in West Virginia that can call Joe Manchin? Or maybe Utah and call up Mitt Romney?
Well, all of the groups like Indivisible and Our Revolution and the Broward County Democrats and all those people are making phone calls to Cinema and Manchin and Kelly in Arizona also.
Oh, I've got a
So I
sister.
know they're out there doing it.
I
If
wonder
you
how
want a
that's
link, I can
going.
send it.
That doesn't feel very, somehow I think Manchin's not that persuaded.
Well,
Thank you,
that-
though.
Sure.
Connie, do you want to use this opportunity to say anything about elections?
That was Connie, right? You said Connie?
Yes.
This was so wonderful to listen to her responses and all our good questions. So for people that don't know me, I'm Connie Henry. I started in WCES 42 years ago, and I am running for District D Town Council. Very, very energizing and very happy to be running. And I look forward to, to the conversation. Thank you.
Well, we sure look forward to helping you get elected as in any ways we can. Just great. Thank you for running.
Thank you. I'm an old-time progressive, learning new things.
Young in spirit.
What part of Watertown is District E?
E.
D.
D like David.
It's as west as you can get, I guess. It's a conservative, fairly conservative district, and Ketting Woodland had to step down. And so it's an open seat right now.
And,
If people wanted to send you some money, would there be a place to do that? Or do you need to wait till you get a treasurer?
Yes, I think it's, my understanding is it's best to have a treasurer. And I'm opening up an account at Watertown Savings Bank soon. So when that happens, that would be totally wonderfully appreciated, since I'm not a wonderful fundraiser.
Let us know.
Wonderful that you're running. I can't vote for you. I don't live in that district, but I wonder, would you consider running for the full term if that's permitted? Not just to fill the vacancy?
Yes, I'm running for the full term because I think they'll appoint someone as an interim, perhaps. That still hasn't been
I
decided.
see.
So I'm running for the full term. But
Oh, I
thank you.
see. Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Do we know if there's anyone coming forward to run for Angie Cornelis's seat?
Oh, good.
Anybody heard any rumors? Anybody should we reach out to?
And if you don't know, she's not running.
Right, I'm saying to fill her seat. I mean,
Right.
He's not, yeah, so which district is that?
A,
A.
Okay.
East End.
Did somebody say she's not running?
That's
Mhm.
right. She's decided to not run.
Yes, I'm on her mailing list, and the latest one is like, it reads like a press release for Alexandria. The developers that are buying everything.
There's a lot of tax money that will come to Watertown.
Yeah, exactly.
It's spent in the right places.
But it's a good opportunity to replace a conservative counselor with a progressive one. And so I hope somebody will decide. And there should be somebody in the East End who's interested, because the East End is fairly heavily represented in this group.
Mhm.
Raise your hand if you live in the East End.
I do, but my, I have to
Oh, time.
But I don't want to run. I can't possibly run.
And Angie's been there for 16 years, so we really need to find someone.
Yeah, do we have a process or a way to generate a list of potential candidates that we might reach out to?
Nicole, do you want to run?
Yeah, what about you, Nicole?
Hey, Nicole. With my husband right
I
now.
second that motion.
Oh, thank you, guys.
All in favor?
This would be the time.
Um,
This would definitely be the time to do it. I
You
mean,
got support, Nicole.
I know. It's my husband, if I weren't working at Perkins right now, like I would be all over this like a duck on a June bug, trust me. But I need to balance, and we're having a dialogue, which is why I'm wondering, is there a process was there like a team we could get together to generate a list of other potential candidates in East End? And I would love to be part of like that brainstorming, although I don't know that I know that many folks. I would also love to see new kinds of diversity on the town council. And, it may be that we could chat with folks in Watertown Citizens for Black Lives to see if there's anybody we could draft so anyway, if anybody wants to like hop on a call about something like that at some point, or is organizing one, please invite me and I would be so happy to join that conversation.
Maybe each of the working groups could bring it up, to see if we can
Great
get,
idea, Jackie. I love that.
yeah. We need some younger energy.
I
Right.
resemble that remark. No.
You are
I know
younger.
you do. I know you do, Nicole.
Nicole,
We don't.
Nicole, you are younger.
You definitely are younger. We're not younger anymore.
But here's the chance to get younger progressives engaged, right? Like that's part of it, is how do we get younger progressives engaged and active? And anyway, I think it's worth thinking about.
Ryan Garvey lives in the East End.
Oh,
Brian.
does he?
Very white male, but okay.
He's a white male, but he's young and progressive.
I wonder if Uplift Watertown should also be included in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great idea.
I think the main important thing is to get a progressive candidate.
Agreed. Totally agreed.
That becomes the first item on that list.
I totally agree.
An electable one.
It's always questionable as to who's electable, but if they're progressive, at least we have a shot at something.
well, unlike District D, I don't know of anybody who is thinking of it running in A, who is more conservative or more conservative than Angie. This is a unique opportunity. I know that Connie may face a difficult challenger, but not one that she can't beat, but a difficult challenger in D. But nothing I've heard of so far anyway, and I don't have my ears to as other people might like, but no one I've heard in A.
Interesting.
I don't think there's been a cultivation of people, there's no one's cultivated a lot of, she's been there for 14 years and there was one race, she only had one race that I remember, and I was helping the person try to unseat her. And so there's, she's got this base around constituents that she's done a lot of work for, and she has constituent stuff has been her bread and butter. So you don't have to fight that this time around. It's you don't have to convince people to not vote for her and to vote for you. You can just go out there and convince people to vote for you. And it's a much different kind of race than it's a rare opportunity that doesn't come very often.
Also, the population has changed a lot. But I don't know whether the new residents, other than me, vote. I mean, I'm a new resident in District A and I vote, but all these apartments that have been built in District A by different, completely different constituency.
Yeah.
Well, and that also leads me to ask, will we have the redistricting data from the census before the November election? Because the lines may shift somewhat in Watertown, I would think.
Yeah.
I can speak to that a little bit, Susan. We're supposed to get the detailed census block level data in September. So that will be too late to redraw any of the precincts in Watertown, I imagine, especially for this. I haven't had a conversation with any of the election commissioners, and I know we're kind of in between town clerks here in Watertown. So my guess is that there will be no re-precincting. Maybe the town councilors on the call can correct me if I'm wrong, but my guess is that there will not be time for re-precincting before the November election. I will point out, though, that what may happen before that is, and I'm working on this, and this is actually Representative John Lawn's bill, is to extend what we had in our last election forward. So to extend the mail-in voting process forward. So in that case, as you'll recall, last year, everybody got a little postcard in the mail that said, "Hey, do you want a ballot? Check if you want the ballot and send it back." And a lot of people did do that. And the turnout was just amazing compared to even in the Democratic primary when I was on the ballot. It was much higher than a typical year. I think that we can expect, if that were to pass this year, we'll get a lot of those people in those apartment buildings, both in the East End and the West End, will get that little slip of paper saying, "Hey, do you want a ballot?" And, they'll check. Yeah, sure. I'll get a ballot. Why not? And we may get a higher turnout in town elections this year than typically from people who are not normal town voters. That's a hypothesis anyway.
Does District A include the new apartments on Arsenal Street?
Most of them, I don't remember exactly off the top of my head how far down Arsenal it goes, but it definitely includes like Arsenal Yards and all that stuff by there. I think it does not include like the Union, what's the one on the other side of Arsenal Street?
The Leonard.
Yeah, it doesn't include those or the old stockyards. So I don't think it has those, but it does have like Arsenal Yards.
So when you think about the new apartment buildings, are there others that you could identify where they are?
There's not much to, most of the apartment buildings in her district are not there's not very many apartment buildings in her district.
Okay.
Most
they're all the condos on Coolidge Ave, for example, and then the old Coolidge School. Those
yes,
are the big...
I mean, I thought you were talking about new ones. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Isn't School Street the division? So it comes in and anything kind of towards Alston would be A, and the other going the other way would be B?
For the most part, yeah, there's a big chunk that kind of sticks out around the Hosmer School, but for the most part, yeah, anything east of School Street, except for that kind of chunk that's around Boylston and scoops back around. I think Putnam. I can't remember exactly where the line is, but and I'm not looking at the map. But there's the chunk around the Hosmer School neighborhood is also in A. I think Spruce Street actually is the dividing line. So one side of Spruce is in A, and the other side of Spruce is in B.
Any other comments? We are at 5:13. I appreciate people wanting to stick around and dig into our local issues. But I think maybe it's time to wind down. And I want to thank everyone for great questions with Representative Clark, for the working reports that we got from our working groups, and this discussion since Katherine Clark left and continuing. So thank you all for being here. And here it is, the end of our annual meeting in our 42nd year of Watertown Citizens. So thanks all for being here.
All right.
We
Good.
can-
Thank you, Sue Ellen, and everyone else who put it together.
Very
Great job.
outstanding meeting.
Really, really great job.
Wonderful.
Really good.
Jennifer, welcome to the steering committee.
Yeah.
And Pam, you
Yes.
did a great job.
Yes.
moderate
Yep.
As
Thank you, Pam.
well.
Helped a lot.
Thanks, Steve, for coming in.
Yes. It's
Oh,
great.
happy to do it. Good to see everybody. Have a great rest of your evening now, I guess. Bye-bye.
Great.
All right.
Bye.
Well,
Thanks for
Thank
the
you so
welcome.
much.
sure.
It was wonderful.
Bye.
Bye.